gods, no, they don't pay us enough. How am I supposed to get a home in this damned city? Price is too much in Skyrim.
Can a Skyrim guard afford a home? Well, it's been on my mind lately, so I decided to try and figure it out. The guards in Skyrim are well known for their snide, targeted comments.
Let me guess. Someone stole your sweet roll.
But these NPCs are so dehumanized since they're usually helmeted. No face is like no personality, no soul, and therefore nobody cares about them or their lives. But here's the thing, these guards probably have hopes and dreams too. I've got a little story for you. Step into the guard's world for a second. You're an entry-level guard in Whiterun. Nice city, pretty safe, probably fairly low crime rates, making it a lax job. Well, that can get a bit boring after a while. One day after work, the guard perhaps doesn't want to go back to the same old grubby, stinky barracks, so he decides to head to the Bannered Mare for a drink. Well there, he connects with a female guard, and they end up having a great conversation till the sun rises. One thing leads to another, and before you know it, they're madly in love, and decide they want to start a life together. But wait, they can't just live in the barracks. No privacy. How could they start a family there? She-Guard wants to leave her life of guarding and care for their future family instead. So they need to find a home. Fortunately, the Dragonborn hasn't come into town and purchased the Breezehome yet, so there's a prime piece of real estate with the Guard family name on it. Except, it's not that simple. Because, well, we have no idea what a guard in Skyrim makes. Or at least we didn't, until your resident internet weirdo tried to figure it out. We're gonna build a budget here to figure out what the guard, maybe I'll call him Joe, what Joe can afford. Hopefully you're inspired to make your own budget after hearing about this little experiment. So most budgets have three main components: income, expenses, and savings or whatever's left over. And look, let's get one thing out of the way before we dive in. A straight crossover of costs doesn't work because an entire house in the game costs 5,000 septums and a bottle of ale costs 5. That means 1,000 drinks at the local bar is the same cost as a house in the game. This is not the case in life, at least not where I live in the US. The game's economy wasn't built to make sense. It was built for fun or maybe something else. But I'm still trying to make sense of it, and nobody tells you what a guard makes. So I needed to find the most reasonable piece of data. Step 1 then, income. To figure out the unknown, his income, I need to use what is known. We know a bit about Whiterun, we know the career field, and we know what a home costs in Whiterun. So I need to find a city that resembles Whiterun, a career similar to being a guard, and what it pays, and the cost of a home in that city. With this data, I can get a clean ratio that I can use to find X, the variable, which is the Skyrim guard's income. If we were to set it up as an equation, it would be the actual pay, X, divided by the actual home costs, Y, equals the ratio, Z. Then that ratio, Z, is multiplied by the cost of Breezehome, 5,000 septums, Y, to get the guard's pay, X. I started by trying to find a city that I felt pretty well resembled Whiterun. I landed on Denver, Colorado. It's got the mountains around, it's got a meadery that makes mead from the honey of self-owned apiaries, it's got an old tree like the Gildergreen called the Shakespeare Elm, almost 110 years old. And in fact, side note, there's a quote I found that says, though historians cannot confirm this, legend has it that the tree grew from a scion taken from Shakespeare's grave in England. Pretty cool. Also, outside Denver proper, there's a sizable agricultural presence with grain and wheat production. And lastly, it's a fairly centralized spot for the United States. With the location out of the way, we need to find an occupation that could match. Guards are like cops, so I'm going to use police officer salary data that I can find online to start this off. Let's say that the guard has been doing this job for a few years in order to be tired of the same grind. Perhaps he has 3 to 5 years of experience. We're going to assume he's a great guard and got lucky and got hired on at a time where there was a shortage of guards. So he was able to get the top end of the pay range. Denver Gov says cops have a salary that is roughly $110,000 at the top end of the range. This sits at 20% or just a bit above 20% of the value of the average single-family home, starter home in Denver at roughly $500,000. So this would mean that he would be making something like 1,100 septums per year, since that's just over 20% of the cost of Breezehome in Whiterun. Alright, step 2, we need to find his expenses. There's a few categories of expenses we need to hammer out here. The big ones are food and housing, so we'll start with food. The average medieval family probably ate meals with things like bread, eggs, meats, and cheeses. For breakfast, they might have had eggs and toast, so we'll say 2 eggs a day and some bread. For lunch, they might have had a sandwich, if that was a thing back then. So some meat, cheese, and bread. For dinner, they probably had a dish that combines meat, cheese, and some type of carb. We'll just say bread again. Now, a medieval guard might not have been able to drink the local water supply, so they probably drank some ale for each meal. Let's assume 1 ale for lunch and dinner for mom and dad, and a bit of milk. Using Skyrim's base costs for each of these items, I'll put those on screen, that represents $41 per day. Assuming a 30-day month, a family would spend 1,230 septims a month on food, which obviously doesn't work since they only make 1,100 septims a year. So what the heck? Is the whole model broken? Well, no. First off, the 4 ales per day make up 20 septims of the 41 septim daily budget. The raw beef is $8 a day. Chicken eggs are like $4 a day. So I think if we got a cow, some chickens, and Daddy Guard hunted a few times a year, then we can assume that their costs go way down. We'll say that they need to buy bread, cheese, and the occasional ale since they mostly drink cow's milk. The chickens and cow are free to eat whatever they find to sustain themselves. With this in mind, we'll say 2 ales per week, 1 wheel of cheese per week, a loaf of bread each day, a venison every 3 days or so, since Daddy Guard's hunts probably won't sustain them year-round. That brings our monthly grocery budget total to 180 septims. That's 40 septims a month for ale, 60 a month for bread, 40 a month for cheese, and 40 a month for venison. Even if we drop it to 180 septims a month, we're still way above where we really could or should be. Now, before you come after me saying, how did Jeff and Mama Guard afford the cow and chickens? Well, just chill. They obviously saved up some of their dual guard pay from before and bought the animals. Come on, Steven. Alright, moving on. Our next big expense is housing. Whiterun probably doesn't have mortgage options, so the guard is going to need to save up for the full cost of the home. Most mortgages in the United States are 30-year terms, which is 360 months. We'll assume that the guard can rent somewhere in Whiterun or a surrounding area for a slightly lower cost than 1/360th of the total cost of Breezehome. This comes to 24 septims a month or 288 per year. We'll use that as his housing expense until he has enough to buy the home. Lastly, we have a bunch of other categories, such as clothing, security, healthcare, taxes and levies, tithes maybe. We'll kind of get through these quickly. Considering Daddy Guard is hunting a bit, as I mentioned earlier, they have a few pelts left over that can be turned into leather, and they figured out how to make hide clothing with it, so we'll say they don't need to buy any clothes. Since Hubby Guard is a guard, his weapons and armor are supplied there. Simple. Healthcare is kind of a non-issue since it's free at the local temple of Kinnereth. Taxes and levies are never mentioned in the game, so I'm going to conveniently throw them out and say that Balgruuf is just intensely generous with the mounds of gold he got when he sold his integrity to the Empire and Thalmor. He doesn't charge his people for city needs and improvements because he covers the cost himself. Tithes, we'll say Josh or Joe or whatever I named him does a pilgrimage with his family each year to the Elder Gleam and drops off some flowers they picked along the way. Therefore, no tithes needed. So let's do a pulse check. This brings our total monthly expenses to at least 204 septims per month, or 2,448 a year. Now, this is not accounting for any savings, investing, or incidentals. I want to add 10% to their monthly total, making it 224 septims a month to cover incidentals, like maybe some fun or medicine for the cow randomly. Now, when we take our annual income and our annual expenses against each other, it seems like they're screwed. 1,100 septims a year versus 2,688 septims going out. How can they do it? So here's my consensus. Given the limited information we have, and under somewhat normal circumstances and assumptions, a guard in Skyrim cannot afford to purchase a home. Hell, he can't even afford to feed his family. There is hope though. I think with a bit of imagination, we can make this work for Jake, Jim, Joe, whatever I named him. Move on to another video if you're happy with the answer I already gave, but I'm going to dive in a little deeper. We know he's got to bring in at least another $1,600 a year. He's already working every day, he's already hunting a bit, and we're going to assume he has no skills in alchemy, smithing, enchanting, or other monetarily valuable skills, since the guards often tell the Dragonborn how envious they are of the Dragonborn's skills.
Don't suppose you'd enchant my sword. Dull old blade can barely cut butter.
So what do? Mercenary work can be pretty lucrative, considering the Dragonborn will pay $500 for it, but it doesn't have a definitive timeline or duration associated with it, so this isn't doable for the guard since he has to be at work the next day. Maybe extortion? Thievery? Well, there's one big flaw in using the pay of a cop in Denver. It's that it doesn't account for the fact that food and board were often covered for guards by jarls and kings that they were in service to in medieval times. Since the food is so expensive in Skyrim, one could assume that the guards' pay was worth at least whatever their food cost was for 3 meals a day. We found that a day of meals for the family was 41 septims. So let's cut that in half, since the pay would be for the single guard. Then, let's assume that the Jarl doesn't want to cover an ale a day. To account for this, let's drop the food cost to $5 a day. Quite a cut. It might be asking for too much to have the full base pay of 1,100 septims a year, plus 1,825 for the annual food cost savings. To account for that, we'll say $550 or septims, plus the 1,825, which brings our annual pay to 2,375 septims. The guard needs to get an audience with the Jarl, make this proposal to get the 2,375 a year, and now our gap is only 313 septims a year. What can be done for the remaining 313? Honestly, I wasn't sure what the options would be here, since Jebediah probably doesn't have much time or energy left. The guard, Jebediah, needs his big break. What's something available near Whiterun that doesn't break any laws, or go against what the guards explicitly state they can't do, or ask the Dragonborn to do for them? We know that many guards used to be adventurers before taking an arrow to the knee, so I think the final piece here is for Papa Guard to gather 3 buddies, take 4 bounties from the Jarl, or his steward, each year, and they can each make an extra 100 gold from the contracts, and then some more from the sales of the loot. Assuming there are at least 4 bandits associated with each bounty, the Hubby Guard would have 4 full sets of loot to take back for sale. A bandit will have some gold, 25% of the time, so there will be around 5 gold there. We'll do a basic set of equipment. We'll say 4 iron axes, 1 iron axe per bandit, 4 sets of hide armor, and maybe a random minor healing potion. Assuming a merchant will purchase everything for 50% of the base cost, we'd get 620 total, cut it in half, so 310 for 4 full sets, plus the axes and the potion. The guard makes 315 septims on the loot and another 100 from the 4-way split for the bounty awards. This means that his annual income is now 2,375 plus 315, bringing a grand total of 2,690 septims. His annual expense is 2,688, which leaves a savings of 2 septims a year. It'll take him 2,500 years of saving to get enough money to afford Breezehome. Jason and his sweet she-guard wife will never be able to afford Breezehome. It's impossible. But there is hope for you. Now go knock yourself out creating a budget so you can get yourself a home in hopefully less than 2,500 years. Thanks for sticking around. If you didn't hate me and even liked my thoughts a bit, maybe consider doing the YouTube stuff and join my community on Discord. Have a good day. Bye.